Hi everyone, it's Guillaume from Startup Basecamp. Welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. During the show, you will have the opportunity to meet the best climate tech founders, investors, and experts from both Silicon Valley and around the globe. They will share with you their stories and personal journeys into this growing and exciting industry, giving you some insight into the ecosystems that help you to take part in the fight against climate change and benefit from the opportunities it can represent. The podcast is divided in two small interviews. During the first part, you will get to know our speakers, their perspectives on the climate crisis and how climate tech is changing the game. The second part of the discussion will be for members of our community who will learn the speakers' secret sauce on how to and share with you their unique expertise on topics such as fundraising, management, strategy, and so on, to help you to become a better leader in your field. So before we start, I would like to quickly share what we are doing at Startup Basecamp to support climate tech founders in accessing resources and gaining visibility with investors they seek. Our initiatives include a membership-based community platform offering access to a dedicated Slack group with a growing number of founders, experts, and investors from around the world, and a series of exclusive content such as interviews, weekly job listings, events, and our quarterly online pitch of night opportunity. But more than a place where you can learn, exchange, and grow, we are building a matchmaking service to facilitate connections between our members and top investors and experts in the field. And soon, alongside with other top investors, we will be launching a small fund to co-invest in the growth and acceleration of our members. Finally, all of this is possible because of your support and donations. We are a small self-funded team, and we want you to be part of this collective movement against climate change. So please share one episode with a friend and subscribe to the channels. As an added bonus, we will plant a tree for each of our subscribers each time we reach 1,000 new fans or donors. Do not hesitate to connect with me via social media or email guillaume@startupbasecamp. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope to get in touch with you soon. And now, let's go for the show. Hi everyone, in today's episode we are speaking with Ibrahim AlHusseini, Managing Partner at FullCycle. FullCycle is a growth equity fund designed from the bottom up to accelerate the deployment of what they consider to be climate critical technologies. By investing in both the companies and their technologies, Ibrahim ensures that startups go from having a promising technology to being a 800-pound gorilla in their respective vertical. I was tremendously excited to speak to Ibrahim about his goal to accelerate capital deployment towards climate tech startups and companies, a cause that is close to my heart, and that is our mission at Startup Basecamp. Ibrahim's career began with a nutraceutical company run out of his dorm room. After a few more startups, he became a tech VC, but it was only after seeing the slow degradation of the natural environment every year back home in the Middle East that he decided to learn everything he could about climate change and dedicate his life and investments towards mitigating it. In this episode, Ibrahim gives a unique perspective of the VC landscape and why the current VC funding model does not work for the climate crisis. He lays out his argument while also giving a thorough look at investment numbers in the climate tech landscape, who the leading countries are in terms of technological innovation, where the investment gaps are in climate tech funding, and what is he doing to fix that. In the second part of the show, Ibrahim gives us a look at the criteria he uses to base his investment decisions and how founders should pitch him. He then covers what books recommend and how they help him achieve a work-life balance. Ibrahim, welcome to the show.
Hi Ibrahim, welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. I'm super happy to have you here with us today, and especially because I believe we share this common goal, which is to accelerate capital deployment towards those climate tech companies. So I'm looking forward to this great opportunity to hear your story and get up to speed on what you guys are doing to support climate tech companies with FullCycle. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Guillermo. It's good to be here. I appreciate it.
So before we start, as a tradition, could you please give us a 30-second introduction about FullCycle?
You bet. So FullCycle is a growth equity fund that's designed from the bottom up to accelerate the deployment of what we consider climate critical technologies. We invest both in companies and their respective projects to accelerate the deployment of that tech to make sure that it goes from being a promising technology to the 800-pound gorilla in their respective vertical.
So let's start from the top. Can you tell us a bit more about your personal story and background? I mean, what are you passionate about? What do you do besides working on supporting and investing into founders? I mean, what makes you feel inspired or like your best self? As I always ask, who is Ibrahim?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I can't answer who Ibrahim is because it's a perpetual question that I asked myself. But it has been fun, like looking at the hairball that is Ibrahim, and as time goes by, pulling out hair after hair individually and looking at them and studying them and realize how they all affect together and the domino effect that they create in my identity, in my thinking, and my feeling, and my relationships. So super interesting question. I have a very kind of random life story, not very conventional. I'm one of those international students that came to the U.S. to attend college because the U.S. still has the lion's share of the best universities in the world. And I was so eager to move here that I didn't realize that there was a Washington, D.C. and a Washington State, and applied to the University of Washington thinking I was going to Washington, D.C. and ended up in Seattle. And, that fortuitous detour actually is one of the reasons why I ended up staying in the U.S. because I was dating a young lady who was way ahead of her time. And she educated me in the early 90s about monocrops, about depleted farmlands, about the nutritional value in an apple during our age versus an apple our grandparents' age, and why it's so much less nutritionally dense. And that's what got me to start a nutraceutical business. So basically, I started a business out of my college dorm room to supplement people's diets with vitamins because of the low quality of the nutrition that is going around the world, and especially prevalent in America given our industrial agriculture practices. And I guess the rest is history.
It sounds like starting a business out of a dorm room. It's like kind of like sometimes the American dream, and it sounds that having this also this focus on the environment, the nutrition, and how to fix already this kind of problem must have been like very educative for you, and you probably learned a lot. So maybe you can tell us about this those different work and life experience that you had before launching the fund and launching FullCycle. I mean, what did you learn during that journey that in a way give you an edge to start a firm? Maybe if you have one or two, nuggets of experience that you realize that really like you learn a ton during that experience.
So definitely my experience is an edge, but my biggest edge is that I actually care about my work. I mean, not a little bit, a lot. Right now I'm recovering from minor shoulder surgery in the Berkshires. And I'm sitting here, I'm in a beautiful Airbnb. Outside of my window is a field of echinacea flowers. And every day these hummingbirds land on them and drink their nectar, and they just jump from flower to flower. The bumblebees are doing the same, one after the other. And it is the most joyful part of my day. So protecting this beautiful, unique planet that we have is what drives me. It's not the economics, even though they're plentiful. It's not the, it's not the prestige. It's whatever it is that is, always fine to take. Like, I'm happy to take the economics. I'm happy to take the recognition. I'm happy for all of that. But what really drives me is I just think that, having 10 million expressions of multi-celled organisms so beautifully interacting with each other in a closed sphere in the middle of space, and we haven't found any other planet that has any form of life, let alone so many beautiful expressions of it, and not dedicating our careers to making sure that we preserve it and forcing humanity to eventually get into harmony with itself first and with the natural world, it seems like a waste of talent, because it seems so fundamental. Like we all like survivability of us and what makes life worthwhile, which is, beauty and experiences and, uniqueness and richness of being alive. We should preserve that and enhance it. And unless we do that, it makes piling up a bunch of money seem like a really silly life trajectory. So that's the biggest edge that I have, is that I actually love what I do. And I came to it super organically. Do you want me to tell you how that all happened?
Yeah, I would love to learn. I think that's a perfect segue for my next question. Like maybe you have and you mentioned organically, but do you have this really I would say fire starter moment or this haha moment revelation where you realize that God damn, if I can use that term, and maybe we'll beep it, but that really pushed you to say, okay, I want to move into that field. I want to support everything that you just described before.
So the answer is yes. When I built and sold my vitamin business, I took a year off and then built and sold another technology business, and then built and didn't sell another technology business. It got kind of trapped in the dot-com crash of 2001. And it was actually a successful, growing, revenue positive company. It's just nobody would invest in a dot-com after that. And even though I was willing to put up my pro rata, the investors all decided that the internet was a fad and that it would never take off. But here we are right now, you and I, having an interview over the internet. So when Zoom stock was booming, I used to send those old investors a copy of the value of my Zoom stock and write, hey, this fad continues to go. Anyway, so I took the proceeds from my entrepreneurial endeavors and became a general technology investor, which was, very interesting and fulfilling. And I learned so much being a general technology investor. And, I'm from the Middle East. My family owns a home on the Red Sea. And every year I'd go back and visit them. So between 1991 and 2001, I'd go visit my folks and scuba dive in the same spot that I grew up scuba diving in. And I noticed year after year, every time I'd go, there would be material degradation in the quality of the marine life in the same spot. And my vivid memories of this endless, lush, vibrant marine ecosystem completely gave way to a barren, dead, full of plastic, even plastic tires, rubber tires, landscape. So I remember that aha moment, just walking out of the water with my tank on my back and my BCD jacket on, all feeling heavy, just like my heart, and thinking to myself, what's the point of me continuing to accumulate wealth on a planet that's ultimately dying? Because what's happening underneath the surface of the oceans and seas was eventually going to make its way into our day-to-day environment, because there is nothing that affects one part of the biosphere that doesn't affect every other part of the biosphere. It's just a matter of time. So I went home. I was completely befuddled and confused. And in the year between July and December of 2001, I turned my home into climate university. Any professor in any field or adjacent field to climate, to biospheric sciences, that was willing to educate me on what was going on, I was happy to pay to do so. So at the end of that education, I was obviously horrified, but also felt like, okay, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And it's only going to get better if people like me and like you galvanize towards transitioning humanity from this high carbon economy to a low carbon future. And that's going to take a massive technological shift and a massive investment, to transition. So I wasn't a government, I wasn't an NGO. My tools were entrepreneurism and investment capacity and investment experience. So I started my first fund. It was a venture fund. And the idea was to seed some of these companies and help them grow, seed A, B, etc. And, commercially very successful. Some of those companies graduated to become, bigger players. But I realized that the issue with the venture capital model for climate change is that it's too late for that model. I mean, it's kind of counterintuitive because, America is known for venture capital, but there's a very big difference between building a software and compared to building these super high capex infrastructure technologies, first commercializing them, and then one by one building them out across the planet. It doesn't return the same, it doesn't have the speed, the IRR, the sexiness of building an app that, once you build it, 10 million people can download it a day. You can't build 10 million power plants a day. It doesn't work that way. So, the analogy that I give around venture vis-a-vis climate is if the fire is already in your backyard, you don't go invent firefighting technology. It's too late. At that point, you accelerate the rollout of existing technology, which in the fire's perspective is fire hoses, buckets, what is that thing called that sprays that mist, fire, whatever, you get the point. There's existing technology that's proven to put out fires. Our job is to spread that out around the world. So I started a new fund called FullCycle Climate Partners, and it does two things. First of all, it prioritizes where money needs to go in the short term, which is very important because that very few companies are doing that, which I'm very surprised about, because global warming is a specific problem and it has to be addressed in a specific way. It's not like building another dating app. It's not like building a pop brownie delivery drone service. It's not like connecting your fridge to your toaster to your dog collar. All of those, whether you build them this year or next year or the year after, are not going to have a material effect on the quality of humanity. But warming is an actually exponential cycle. So if we have a particularly hot summer, which we are right now, that means that glaciers recede further, snow, ice, sea ice melts more. So that means more of the sun's radiation gets penetrated into landmass, and it creates a warmer summer next year and a warmer summer the year after, because there's less reflective material, whether it's a glacier or sea ice, sending that radiation back into space. So we have to prioritize where money goes in the first quarter of the 21st century, and the second and the third and the fourth. We can't do a shotgun approach. That's happening all over the industry, which I don't understand.
And I think this is a perfect segue to move to my next question, and we'll come back to the full cycle, detail, and we'll uncover the general thesis and the story behind it, and really the focus that you guys have. I like to zoom out now and take a step back at the capital allocation landscape towards climate solution today. And you already spoke a little bit about that. You made this interesting statements that VCs or VC funding on the space might be not the right solution today. I think there's debates around that. I think nothing is like white or black. I think there's a lot of a gray area there. But anyway, this is not the point. So let's start by the fundamentals that makes the climate and clean tech markets more relevant than ever today. Or maybe are we in a bubble type of market, like the first green tech bubble that burst almost a decade ago? And then maybe you can tell us a bit more about after those fundamentals, how much capital is currently deployed, and who are the main capital allocators?
All good questions. Let me read some statistics to you. So right now, proven low carbon technologies exist across all sectors and asset classes, which is great. We're in that moment. And harnessing those technologies in the transition to a low carbon economy turns out to be a $42 trillion investment opportunity. So massive. Investments in real asset infrastructure is a critical component. And there was a McKinsey analysis that estimated that achieving net zero emissions by 2050 is going to require 9.2 trillion annually in physical assets alone, and we're spending about 3.5 right now. So it doesn't matter what the OECD numbers are, as far as I'm concerned, because global warming doesn't know borders or OECD numbers or not. So let me see. The markets are beginning to respond to the opportunity. So climate investments boomed right now to a total of 87.5 billion. So that's about 14 cents of every venture dollar went into climate up to the first half of 2021. I know that number has decreased since, unfortunately. I think right now, January, there was 101 deals that were an all-time high. But that figure is now, by June, is down substantially. In total, there's 409 deals closed in the first half of 2022, and that's down about 33% from the 2021 highs, where there were 612 deals, which is down from 3% from 2020's 421 deals. So, is it high? Is it low? It's cycling with the market. I think when Larry Fink says the next 1,000 unicorns are going to be in climate tech, I think he's absolutely right. And I think that, money's looking for, there's a lot of money still sloshing around, and it's looking for a place to go. And it's very trendy. This is hot right now. Everybody piles into it. That's hot right now. And so, climate tech was very hot last year. Now it's becoming lukewarm. It's going to be hot again every time, the reality that this is not a nice to have, it's a need to have. So it's like there is no going around this. Like there is no waiting around till the market does this, till the market does there, because every time there's a climate calamity, the ripples of it affect every asset class that anybody holds, and affects financial markets themselves, because the economy is based on a stable climate. Civilization actually only existed because in the last 12,000 years, we've lived in a stable climate era called the Holocene Age. And that's what allows us to congregate in cities and start to build, means of exchange. And that's what results in economies, et cetera, et cetera. So that is now disrupted. It's just the beginnings of it. So people haven't really extrapolated the extent of what it means not to invest in transitioning to a low carbon economy to their portfolio. What does that actually mean to the rest of their portfolio? So it is like this idea of it being cyclical and trendy will give way soon enough to the necessity of having to do it.
Do you have any insight on which sector of this green climate, sustainable economy capture the most capital today? I mean, does the current, I would say, distribution make sense regarding the need to reduce effectively and rapidly CO2 or greenhouse gas emission? And maybe what are the major constraints that you have identified to really in a way, put the dollar where there's the most impact? It's a need of new policies maybe to be put in place, a lack of I would say capital available versus expected returns. Sometimes people early on were like thinking that giving to the green economy was like being in the non-profit world and give to someone who's not seeking also for return, or is it maybe a lack of startups or tech available to scale or to commercialize?
So I'll give you the data first, and then I'll tell you how we're prioritizing where money goes. So energy and transportation is where most of the money went in 2021 and before. So 81% of total emissions reduction by 2025 is received 25% of the investment dollars. So basically, 81% went to 25% of where the emissions went. A salient example is light-duty battery EVs, which represent 3% of total emissions reduction potential, but received over 60% of total investments. In 2022, a lot of the money went out of EVs, all kinds of EVs, and into carbon capture technology and a bunch of other sectors that I don't have the data on right now. And again, to me, that is an example of trends, not on priorities. As you know, we've all read all the headlines of ClimateWorks' plant being built in Iceland. But per dollar invested, the result of the amount of carbon that they're going to be removing from the atmosphere is the equivalent of something like getting rid of 730 cars off the road. So you're talking about, let's just be generous and say tens of millions of dollars to remove the equivalent of 730 cars worth of emissions off the road. And as a carbon return on investment, I understand that the idea behind this is to start at the $700 per ton cost and try to drive it down over time through innovation. But if we were to focus on natural solutions like ocean fertilization, and we can get thousands of times more CO2 immediately, not one day when the plant is built, immediately started to draw down carbon. So for the carbon reduction market, it's a perfect example of the answer to your question is what is directing where money is going? Economics. That's the answer. It's not climate, it's economics. It's well-intentioned. I'm not saying that there's no good intention behind it, but the ultimate driver is where is the return? Because most fund managers, if not 99.999% of fund managers, their number one priority is not to lose their job and the ability to raise another fund, and to maximize their carried interest. And the incentives around this whole industry are off because you can't have individual economic incentives to solve existential global problems. It creates a really whacked set of incentives that has to be corrected. We don't address these in our fund in the sense that we don't address them by going, okay, this is the priority such that we're going to take unnecessary risk or invest too early or not prioritize economics. But what we do is we look for needles in haystacks, and which goes back to the thesis, which also answers your question in this way: where should money go? So here's a statistic that most people don't realize: is CO2 is the weakest greenhouse gas. It is the most abundant, longest lingering greenhouse gas. I mean, we literally have CO2 molecules in the atmosphere from the mid 1800s, from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Things like methane and nitrous oxide, for example, are short-lived gases, but they're much more potent. So ultimately, 1% of atmospheric greenhouse gases by volume are actually responsible for 46% of the warming. So you have, literally 1% responsible for close to 50%. So from a carbon return on investment or a climate return on investment, since we're spending a lot less than what we need to be spending or investing a lot less than we need to be investing, that is where dollars need to go because it gives us the most leverage and extends our runway the most. So that's the first thing we do is we focus on infrastructure scale technologies, not consumer facing stuff, not, like just infrastructure level big capex technologies that focus on methane, nitrous oxide, refrigerant abatements, and we make sure that the technology is advanced enough such that our job becomes to accelerate the rollout of the technology, not just getting it to become proven for the market. Because so what? So we get it, we prove it to the market that now it takes 8 years or 12 years or whatever it is to build the first demonstration plant or the first demo plant. And then we have to build the first commercial plant. Then we have to wait 3 years for all of the numbers to come back. And maybe they're good and maybe they're not. And then the infrastructure funds are like, hey, well, tell us when you build the second one, and then we might be interested. Because everybody wants to be first in line to fund the third plant. So you have a 10, 12, sometimes 18-year time frame of which these technologies that are critical today are sitting on the shelf waiting to become commercial. And a lot of those companies die waiting for this moment. So what we do is we locate the technologies that have the highest impact from a climate perspective and are ready for the market. So we don't take technology risks. And then we pile our money into rolling out as many of their projects as possible. So then the bigger pools of capital, the ones that want to invest in proven infrastructure technologies with high IRRs, can look at those and go, oh, no brainer to fund them because there's no technology risk. And then they fund it project by project based on whatever the local risk factors are for that specific project without worrying about whether the technology is going to work or not. And that accelerates that bridge from promising technology to the standard torchbearer of that specific climate vertical that we call critical because it addresses that 1% that is responsible for 46% of the warming.
So can you tell us a bit more about I'd like to go back a little bit to the decarbonization of the economy. I mean, regarding what would be, according to you, the US advantages and weaknesses in regard of decarbonizing this economy and probably pushing this kind of project and technology that you guys are identifying and that hopefully will accelerate this decarbonization? I mean, how do you compare the US effort in that sense versus maybe the rest of the world, the European Union or entity? Do you see major roadblock as of today to accelerate this decarbonization, except smart allocation of capital, as you sounds to at least uncover? I mean, what needs to happen to accelerate this movement, and in which timeline do you think is sounds realistic to you?
I can't speak about the timeline simply because there's a governmental issue here that's creating an imbalance in the market, right? So the tax credits for oil and gas exploration, and in the IRS code, the fossil fuel assets can IPO in ways that other assets can't, like single level taxation entities can go public, but for specific designated parts of the economy, real estate and fossil fuel assets, which is fascinating because the fossil fuel industry has done such a good job promoting two fallacies. One of them is that that they operate in the free market, and they don't. They operate in a completely subsidized market because of the existing IRS code that supports them over other types of businesses. So they're not a free market, number one. Number two is they've done a very good job in the 90s hiring PR firms to plant doubts on the validity of man-made climate change. Now, they stopped funding that effort because they're now all piling into these technologies and they want to invest and benefit from them. But the problem is you have a massive voting bloc that now actually believes all of this to be true, and they will fight tooth and nail. And that's neither here or there. The problem is that they'll vote for people who also are climate deniers. So when we're trying to create a level playing field where government can play a role in accelerating the incentives for investment capital to actually go into clean tech and low carbon infrastructure, those people are going to get in the way of it, because to them, this has somehow been labeled as a socialist activity, even though the industries they support are subsidized by the social contract of the United States. So to answer your question, the leader in clean tech is Europe, and then Canada, and then the United States. We know this because we see dozens of companies per week, and we go into detail on all of them. And the ones that are most advanced are European. The ones that are second most advanced are Canadian. And the least advanced, because they were new to this space, are American companies.
So, and you believe that even the Biden administration is still or at least the whole, Washington, I would say, politics and administration behind that is really still slowing it down, the decarbonization and the effort, and really still in a way supporting or being under the influence of the Exxon and others oil company lobbyists?
Not the administration. I think the administration is well-intentioned, and they're trying to do all the right things, and they're listening to all the right people. But the balance of power requires them to have X amount of support in Congress, which they do, in the Senate, which they don't. Thanks to Joe Manchin, the man can stop any sort of advancement of clean energy because his funders and his states all come from the coal industry. He himself is an investor in the most polluting energy producing industry out there. And it is again, we have individuals, literally individuals, just like the gatekeepers of the big pools of capital. We have individuals who are holding up literally humanity and all living species so they can benefit individually. It's fascinating to me, actually, to watch this, because the man has grandkids, so you have to be a little sociopathic to look at your grandkids and be yeah, but I don't want to lose the next election. Geez, I like being a senator. Apparently I like it more than my grandkids.
But do you see that, or do you have hope that in the coming decades, or maybe 5 years, or next round of election, this could change in the US? Do you feel that there's something happening, and I would say people are willing to embrace that change, or you think that unfortunately we'll need to find our own way and to deal with that no matter what, at any cost?
I mean, what is climate change or gas inflation the issue that people are most concerned about right now? I'm talking about the majority. I'm not talking about you and I. I'm talking about if we had our pulse on all the ways that we check the pulse of society in the United States, what would we think the most talked about issue is? It's not climate change. It's gas prices, cheese prices, hot dog prices. That's what people are occupied with. They're occupied with how this affects their individual life. And we are trained not to think long term anymore. We're a YOLO economy. Have you heard that before?
Never heard about that, but I was thinking of this, Instagram feed that you can have where every second you move to the beach to your friends, to a dog, to whatever you can have. According to you, what makes you think that, economic growth and in a way high return can be compatible with sustainability in reducing global emissions? I mean, we often hear that the only way sometimes to go should be degrowth.
Oh, I mean, it's to me, I see this, and the way I talk about it is it's just another technology transition. And every time we make a technology leap forward, trillions trillions of value is created. It's not the other way around. When we transitioned from a landline to a mobile phone, we got the first trillion, 2 trillion, $3 trillion market cap company in history. Literally within 5 years, that company went to, from nobody ever reaching a trillion to them hitting 3 trillion. And every supplier around them and every other company that has since bought all the media companies, because of so much money got created in the transition from landline to mobile. Same thing with print to digital media. Same. You can go back to the horse and buggy to the automobile and how that shaped our entire civilization. So, transitioning from dirty, inefficient, slow, the technologies with unlimited negative externalities to their clean 21st century efficient counterpart is inevitable. This is going to happen even if there wasn't a climate crisis, because these are technologies that are fundamentally better, faster, cheaper. So there's no issue here. The issue is that we've created headwind for ourselves, because every behemoth industry, as soon as it starts getting market pressure, kicks the can forward by creating misinformation and disinformation. Whether it was cigarettes, putting doctors on TV saying that they were fine, whether it's John D. Rockefeller making the managers of the lead gasoline plants drink lead so he can show people that it's safe. There's always a campaign. Same thing with asbestos. I mean, it took 20 years from when it was proven that asbestos is killing people till the banning of asbestos took 20 years. And in the meantime, lots of business got done. So we're in that moment where we're living in the inertia of the fossil fuel industry, obfuscating the reality of their impact of their product and the expiration of their entire system of profit making, and kicking the can forward as much as possible, to the point that now they're quietly just investing in technologies that we invested in 7 years ago, and they're the ones who are leading the next round. This is the irony of ironies, because they're part of the energy transition. They're ultimately energy companies, so they're transitioning to the new versions of it while having reaped the benefit of 30 years of funding misinformation. But I hope it doesn't blow up in all of our faces, because they now have, tens of millions of people who don't believe we have a problem.
So, with the goal in mind to keep this, 1.5 degrees Celsius overall temperature increase by 2050, and unfortunately, I think we're going to be a little bit above that. What is, according to you, the proportion of tech versus nature-based solution that needs to be implemented, and why do you believe pushing maybe both type of solution is important or not?
Oh, well, so there are every time there's a natural-based solution, we should focus on that, because we have a finite amount of investable dollars, and that produces much quicker, much bigger carbon returns on investment, thousands of times actually, and start producing those results immediately. Like if you fertilize the oceans, the blooms of plankton that result from it happen almost instantaneously. You don't have to go and buy steel and get permits to build a carbon sucking plant somewhere, and it takes you 5 years just to break ground and 2 years just to get going. Then you have to give it energy for 24 hours a day, and that energy has to come from somewhere. Plus, steel produces 1 ton of CO2 per ton of steel produced. So now you have that dilemma. Then you have to offset the actual carbon resulting from the structure that you built, and then you start sucking carbon out of the atmosphere. It's now 7 years that from the time that you came up with the idea and got the funding, and then the results are this big. So like I'm an investor, love all the story of how we're going to change the world by building 1 million carbon sucking economically viable machines, and that's what everybody wants, and that's what Stripe wants and Microsoft wants. It's because it's a simple story and you can quantify it, not because it's the right thing. We have a plethora of moments in history where we made a choice, and the choice was basically around what seemed like the right thing to do, not necessarily what the right thing was. I mean, like I can tell you, I'm a student of history. I can tell you 1,000 of examples of that.
So you definitely not believe on the fairy tale bulletproof silver bullet of those climb walks of this world, but I think I'd like to get your last opinion on this to close this section regarding the recent controversy around like ESG labeled funds. I mean, which often have these those dirty assets in their portfolio. I mean, what's your take on those funds that claim to be sustainable and try to use those ESG sustainable labels or as greenwashing tools sometimes? I mean, are they hurting your industry? What should be put in place in a way to avoid and clear this up, I would say?
I mean, so I'm glad ESG exists. I'm glad there is a label that you have to do something to earn. Okay? Because what that does is allows a separate pool of capital to invest in your company. Now, is it completely a scam? No. Is it mean, oh my God, a company that has high ESG metrics mean that they're a good guy? No, it just means mostly that they're less of a bad guy. It's like if in that burning house, that company without ESG standards was sitting with a blowtorch, was sitting with a flamethrower doing this, and then they had to make adjustments, and now they're just sitting with a blowtorch. Both are not helpful in a burning building, but one is less bad than the other.
So what do you think should be then put in place? Because sometimes it like put a lot of discredit into the more sustainable and like funds that really try to have a greener or cleaner portfolio and take care of the assets and the investments that they do. So what should be put in place to kind of like curate and avoid those bad guys with the torch inside of the building?
So, thankfully, there's something like $38 trillion that is being transferred. I'm so sorry about this.
No worries.
Go away. Gosh, I don't even know how to tell him to go away. Hopefully he doesn't call back. And how do I turn this off even? Jesus, who calls on FaceTime audio these days? So, tell me the question again.
So the question was like, okay, what do you think?
Happen? Okay,
yeah,
I got your.
How can we like get rid of them? What should be put in place in a way to avoid those bad guys to be in the building while everything is burning? You know what I mean?
So I'm I don't know the quote perfectly, but it's a Buckminster Fuller, Buckminster Fuller quote. And it says something like, don't fight the system, just build a parallel system or something that's better, and eventually it'll make the other system obsolete. So there's $38 trillion of wealth that's being transferred to the next generation and, to spouses over the next 20 years. Great. So a lot of those young people grew up in the information age. They're not climate deniers. They're not, they know the mess that their parents and grandparents created, and they want their money to be aligned with their values. They don't want to invest in Exxon and Chevron and Facebook and all these problematic companies. They want to invest in real things. So there's going to be so many ETFs, so many funds that have their own metrics, that only create much higher metrics than just the stamp of ESG. I don't maybe you can educate me. The European Union is already doing that. It's something like, what is it, anyway, they have a new system that is much more stringent than just the ESG label. And there's going to be so many pooled ETFs that are going to focus on the right types of companies. And these young people will want to hold that in their portfolio and not just these, random companies. Because it's so confusing when they look at some of these ESG funds and they're like, wait a second, what is Caterpillar doing in there? What is Ford doing in there? Now, these companies are doing great things, but they're still not doing good things. They're just doing less bad things, which is better than the companies that are doing all bad things for sure. But we're just past that point. That point we should have been doing in the 80s. We should have been doing less bad in the 80s, and by now have been doing strictly prioritized strategic good, except now we're still labeling less bad as good. We need to hurry up.
So let's go into the specific of the FullCycle fund. Can you tell us a bit more about the story behind it, the genesis of it? What's the initial gap that you guys saw, and that led to the thesis of FullCycle that you already started to explain? And maybe you can tell us a little bit more after, what do you offer to founders and companies that you invest in? What are the challenges are specific to them that you guys try to bridge this gap and really help them, and they in a way should come and work with you guys?
So we have a very founder-friendly proposition, because not only do we invest in the equity of the company, we also invest in their project. And that's one of the biggest ways we can support these technologies and these founders. From a technology standpoint, like I said earlier, the biggest issue in the industry is who's going to fund the first commercial plant. And usually these founders have to run around the earth trying to cobble together, some government subsidy, some grant here and there, some really impassioned investors who are willing to take extreme risks, all kinds of things. There's companies that have taken 19 years to fund their first commercial plant because of that gap in the market. Who's going to fund the first commercial plant? Like I said earlier, the joke is everybody wants to be first in line to fund the third project. So who's going to fund those first three projects? So we do that. And the reason why we do that and how we offset the risk for our LPs is we get an exclusive to fund dozens more projects at pre-negotiated economics. So the risk we take on the first ones gets washed out in the future ones without having to get pressure from cost of money when other people want to pile in. Our economics are already pre-negotiated. So we invest in the equity of the company, we go deep, we sit on the board, we pick projects together, and then we invest in those projects, and we want to make sure that they're commercial projects, not low return, low IRR projects, no, fair market value returns. And then we have this mix of project equity financing and corporate equity ownership. And that's kind of our secret sauce, or not so secret sauce, that allows us to accelerate the deployment of climate critical technologies and help founders solve this biggest gap in their business, which is very helpful to them because they also don't suffer as much dilution, because part of that mix that they cobble together is also selling a lot of corporate equity to try to fund that first commercial plant. And sometimes it doesn't work because the plant cost $100 million, but the company's valuation is $80 million. And it's like, let's say they sell 25 million of equity. Well, that's their dilution to add to the mix that they need to make that plant viable and running. And we take all of that off the table for them. So we're a very deep strategic partner that's also value aligned. We're not like Johnny or Janet come lately to the space. We've been doing this before any of the nomenclature was even invented. Like I've been in this space in 2001.
So how do you source those incredible founders and team that you guys fund? I mean, like, how do you identify it, that in a way they reach the market readiness stage? What are the criteria and maybe the framework that you guys use or defined? And can you give us maybe like one example of a previous investment that you guys did to illustrate all of that?
Sure. So the InPipe is a good example. So, InPipe came to us from one of our investors, and we looked at it back when it was early and we passed. And then they built their first commercial plant, and then they came to us again and we invested years later. And what these guys do is they do something super fascinating. They most people don't realize that 61% of the energy budget of any municipality is the cost of pushing water around, because they have to put enough pressure on the water to reach the furthest regions of their municipality. So if you live close to the water treatment plant, the pressure is very high. So that's why they have to put pressure reduction valves there to minimize that pressure, and all of that wasted kinetic energy is wasted as heat. So what these guys do is they built a pressure reduction valve that also happens to be a hydro turbine. So it does the job of reducing the water pressure, but it also captures all that latent energy and puts it back into the grid, times dozens of these all over every city and every town all over the world. And when you add that all together, you're literally talking about a systemic reduction in wasted energy that results in about 6% on a global scale less energy use for something that produces a low 20s double digit IRR, and is a systemic, relatively easy solution to integrate, compared to the building by building efficiency play where every building has to get new glass and new HVAC, and maybe people want air conditioning or a heat pump and maybe they don't. That's a very slow process, times hundreds of millions of dwellings all over the world. And it's still efficient, it still has to happen, but we look for systemic solutions. And this solution is the no-brainer for every city and town, because they're already installing these pressure reduction valves, except these guys turn that pressure reduction valve also into a hydro turbine for them.
So going back to that, and can you tell us a bit more like this, like how do you define that them or others, I would say like companies that, pitch you guys are in a way market ready? What is the different like key data points or like specification that makes you think like, okay, this company is not just about the idea and this prototype, but really if we push on the accelerator and give them the cash, they will have this, they are ready to grow and conquer at least one part of the market. Like, I mean, how do you identify that? Because I feel it sometimes could be very challenging, and how do you know that in a way the market will adopt that technology, or is it really already proven?
Yeah, so when you remember that needle in the haystack, so we look for that needle in a haystack, and usually that needle also comes with existing installations and revenue. Not that we're specifically looking for revenue, but they've already done it. Like they've done all the work that they need to do to have already built the technology and found a customer to buy it, and it's been operational for X amount of years. So when we come in, they make our job really darn easy. It's just that remember the buckets and hoses in the burning house? They've already proven that a bucket is a very effective technology, and so is a fire hose. It's just that they've come during a time where they've built something that was not trendy. So they've been sitting waiting for companies like funds like FullCycle to take their technology and roll it out. Because you're wondering, like, why is this not ubiquitous yet? Because all the money was going to apps on your iPhone, because every smart person in the world was trying to figure out how to get you to buy more shit you don't need. And now that's no longer sexy. Now that's considered a bad thing. So now people are like, oh my God, I'm now going to quit my marketing, technology job, and I'm going to invent clean tech. Well, great. Well, a lot of people have already invented fantastic things, and they've been sitting waiting for the right pool of capital to come and roll them out globally. And, I just lament the fact that, even if it was clear to us, it was not clear enough to enough investors and family offices and high net worth individuals and institutions that would invest, that they took so long to fund us, and we were later than I would like to fund them. But hey, we're now, have deployed into 5 different companies, and we're already breaking ground on 2 projects for 2 of those companies. So our thesis is working. It's not a blind pool. It's not a theory. And all of those companies, 3 of them are about to get marked up substantially. So from a commercial standpoint, our fund is doing fantastic. If you look at it without any ideological alignment, if somebody doesn't even care about climate change, just commercially, they can salivate on our returns and participate. And we're not here to, stand on a soapbox. We're just here to redirect capital where we think we need to in a risk-adjusted manner. So for our sake, to make sure that Joe Manchin's grandkids actually have a future, and make sure that our LPs and our GPs and all our partners benefit from, and everybody benefit from, a world that's in harmony with itself and with the natural world, which we're far from today.
So which sector are the most promising for you today in terms of what I called impact cash return, or ICR? This means building impactful company while creating highly profitable business, and I think that's what you guys are really looking for. Do you see any underdog or subsectors, areas that you're really excited about and that other investors are maybe not looking at or under looking at it? Tell us a bit more about that.
My dream. Okay, you want to hear what my dream is?
Love to.
Yeah. My dream is for someone to grow macroalgae at economics that allow them to be a substitute for animal feed. Because if you think about what happens then, is if you can feed cows seaweed, and you can grow massive forests of seaweed. First of all, they start cleaning the oceans. Second of all, they give marine habitat thousands of hectares of space to thrive in. Then all the billions of acres that we dedicate to farming food to feed our cows and pigs, that all gets moved to the ocean, allows that to get rewilded and become habitat again for the natural world, and become a way to draw down carbon as trees grow in it and all kinds of grasses grow in it, and creates probably a healthier cow to begin with, because I don't believe people are all going to become vegan. So you have this virtuous cycle where you have the economics from the macroalgae. Some of it comes from selling chemicals to all kinds of industries. The rest goes to animal feed. And I don't need to repeat myself. And then all the pesticides and herbicides and rodenticides and all the crap we spray on the land that ends up polluting all our waterways and our oceans, all of that goes out of the equation. And you get this fantastic virtuous cycle because you can grow this stuff, without having to, put a zillion and one chemicals. You just have to create the right lattice structure and whatever, robotics you need to minimize the cost of harvesting and planting, and then find a way to dry it and transport it at economics that work. That would be a dream come true.
And without, speaking about like the tons of CO2 that will be also absorbed by, those algae inside of the ocean. That's super exciting. So for anyone who's working on that out there and sounds to have something that makes sense, please contact Ibrahim. I'm sure he will have an attentive look at it. Out of all the pitches, that you hear, in your opinion, which are the solution, or at least you mentioned a few of them already during the interview, that you believe makes no sense whatsoever and sounds like they may be a waste of time and resource or greenwashing? Would you have maybe one example without naming any companies? We don't like to shame here on the show, but
Yeah. No, listen, I don't think anybody has. Maybe I'm naive, but I actually don't feel like people have, specific sinister intentions. I think they fundamentally believe that they're doing the right thing, and I can't think of a better example of, to me, wasted capital other than these direct air capture companies that are popping up all over the place. I have no issue at all with, having a technology that is able to take all the emissions from industry and turning it into something valuable. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But popping machines all over the world, that are very expensive to run, to build, and to operate, especially knowing that nature can do a such better job for so much less money, is mind-boggling to me. Literally mind-boggling. And I really hope I'm proven wrong. Maybe I don't know something that I'm missing in the equation. I have no idea, but at the moment I am baffled at the billions that have been invested in this space and the companies that are continuing to back it.
So how do you measure impact? I saw that you use this CROI, or carbon return on investment, as a specific criteria to that drive your investment decision. Can you tell us more about that process, that frameworks? Do you rely on scientists and experts to validate that, or how does it work? How strict
CROI
is that?
Standard, actually. CROI, we didn't invent CROI. CROI is standard. CROI 20 is what we did, which is, there's something called GWP 100 and GWP 20. GWP 100 is global warming potential of a molecule. In the past, we've been saying this, by the way, for 20 years. Why are we calculating the potency, the greenhouse potency of a molecule over 100 years? We don't have 100 years. We don't have 20 years. So since you have two metrics, we should use GWP 20 to assess what is the most potent greenhouse gases to focus on. For example, GWP 20 of methane is 86. GWP 100 of methane is 24. So because it degrades over time in the atmosphere into CO2, ironically. So if we are focused on GWP 100, then we look at methane as not so potent because it goes down to 20. But since warming begets warming, we need to front load the impact of our dollars such that we can slow down the warming cycle until it's stabilized and then start to cool it down, right? So that's when we marry CROI with GWP 20 and invented CROI 20 as the metric that we used. We also make sure that every technology that we choose has a minimum of 1 gigaton abatement at full deployment. Because the discrepancy between what human civilization produces in greenhouse gas emissions and what the earth can absorb is around 52. So every one of these technologies is responsible for one or more out of 52. One technology that we're behind, which is a Dutch technology called Sonova, At full deployment, it can produce, it can abate 4 to 7 gigatons at full deployment, and it has the potential to close all landfills in all nations because it's a real viable solution to landfills globally and our whole global waste issue. So imagine the ripples for the ocean and ocean marine life and you're talking about on a GWP 20 basis 4 to 7 gigatons out of 52. That's just one technology and one company.
So what's next for FullCycle?
A vacation?
Vacation? We don't have time for vacation. We don't even have 20 years left.
So what's next for us, honestly, is we need to do a better job focusing on raising more capital into our funds and starting more funds. Because as you can imagine, raising money during COVID was a nightmare. And we are, close to closing our current fund. So, that's something that we have to focus on, and we need to close it now that it's getting marked up substantially. We need to close it and start working on our next fund because we have so many great companies, and we're not a throw spaghetti against the wall type fund. We don't invest in 40 companies per fund and hope 2 become unicorns and 5 return capital and the rest we never talk about again because we know what happens to them. That's not our theory. We invest late, we go deep, we accelerate the success curve for them because climate change is a race against time, and we have our next 10 companies for our next fund already ready. We just want to focus on going a little deeper with our existing companies and leave them, they're already walking, so we want to leave them running. They can start sprinting after us on their own and start focusing on helping the next 10 that are crawling. We need to lift them up and help them walk, and once they start running, start the fund after that. So that's somewhere in there is going to be a short vacation, god damn it.
Okay, but thank you so much. Last question for this part of the show. Like, what's your personal view on the climate crisis? I mean, as I always ask, are we doomed? What would you say to people who are feel demoralized by all of the visible consequences as of today about climate change? What would be your words?
You mean like the Western monarch butterfly being added to the endangered species list, things like that? Yeah, it's damn demoralizing. You're right. My response,
I'm speaking about the wildfire that you find everywhere on Earth. I'm speaking about the heat that I'm currently living through now here in Europe. I'm speaking about all of those consequences, like mountains starting to collapse, glacier and whatsoever. Like, I feel people could be demoralized, and I'm feeling sometimes demoralized, but very excited about what I do. And speaking with people like you makes me give me a lot of hope. But what is your opinion regarding this crisis right now? What would you tell them?
So my opinion is your biggest lever, if you're somebody of minimal wealth, your biggest lever is how you vote. So vote responsibly. It doesn't matter if you like the person. You're not going to date them. This is not a popularity contest. Your job is to vote for the most qualified person who cares about the most important issue of our lifetime, which is climate change. And they have facility to do something about it. So that's the number one thing that you can do. If and if you're somebody of means, then find the right pools of capital to pull your money into that are going to help transition us to a low carbon economy. And there's plenty pools of capital to do that in. But, truth be told, and I don't like to exaggerate, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But it will get better if we stop being demoralized to the point of being immobile. And honestly, stop buying crap. When that commercial that shows up in the middle of your Instagram feed with the beautiful model that is when you now have to buy this, you don't do it. Stop buying more things. Nobody needs more things. Okay? That has to end from the human story, and anybody who promotes it needs to stop promoting it. It takes so much water and energy and materials to produce the things. Stop buying more than you need. And because like, if you're not gonna help, then please don't hurt.
So how can the community, of investors, founders, experts listening to the show today can help you?
Oh, I mean, very, very straightforward. Just go to our website, send us an email with your company, with, if you want to look at any of our material, you're welcome to, if you're a qualified investor. Thank you, for caring. Anybody can play a part. Like Guillermo, one day, and I don't know your full story, but you're dedicating your podcast to spreading a very important message from, and creating a platform that you're bringing, expertise, ideas, founders, money, creating kind of a marketplace for every stakeholder to come together and accelerate the transition to a low carbon economy. Like, be creative. Anybody can play a role in doing this. So, again, our website is fullcycle.com. My Twitter handle is AlHusseini. We also have a Twitter handle that's at FullCycle. Reach out to us and, let's have a conversation, see how we can partner up together on, on making that time frame that is going to get worse before it gets better as short as possible.
Any question that I should have asked you for this first part of the show that I did not?
Listen, I love to talk about my experiences with the natural world, and I just want to remind everybody to go out and be in nature and remember what you're protecting. Because if you're landlocked in a city and you haven't gone to a forest, you haven't sat and watched hummingbirds feed on an echinacea flower and really just marveled at creation. Calling it creation is so loaded. At the natural world, then I invite you to do that. Just so you know what's at stake, because life is a miracle. It is a miracle. If you think about it in the vastness of the emptiness of space, we are, the chances that any of us are alive and that anything is alive at all is so infinitesimal that we have infinite opportunity to marvel at all of this and to be filled with a desire to protect it. So go be in nature and remember.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim, for your time. Incredible insight on the industry, your passion. And I'm so excited to see many brilliant people like you putting so much effort to move the ball towards a better and cleaner world. And I'm very excited to follow up on you guys and look at the companies that you're investing in, and maybe some of them will be part of the show too. So don't hesitate to keep in touch.
Thanks, Guillermo. Thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. And again, hats off to you for having a show about climate tech and shining a spotlight on this field and the importance of it. I really respect that and admire it very much and appreciate it as well. So good luck to you and to all of us. We're going to need it.
Thank you so much. Hi, it's Guillaume again. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. As I said, do not hesitate to share an episode with a friend. Also, if you value the work we do for the climate tech ecosystem, here is how you can contribute to it. Today, I'm asking for your support and a donation or sponsorship to make the work of our self-funded team more viable. Even a small contribution means a lot to us. In any case, I will invite you to subscribe to our channels and visit our website startupbasecamp.org to discover more episodes like this one. And get your membership to access all our members' exclusive content. So remember, all of this is possible because of your support and donation. And we want you to be part of this collective movement against climate change. Let's keep in touch, and I hope you will enjoy our next show with us.